Be now put.
I'll hear from Keith Locke.
Mr Chair, I think there's a bit of inconsistency in the Act position. Hilary Calvert has said, well, there's not really much private title, it's just a bit as a result of erosion, or how you define the high tide mark, and a few other 48 or whatever grants of title amounting to not much land, and don't worry about it all. Well, then why exclude in Part 2, and I think ACT probably supports this, exclude that private title land from the application of the Common Marine and Coastal Area and all the access provisions and all the rest of it? It's just inconsistent that Māori should have their customary title land subject to full access, and it goes over to pass, to repass, on, over, across the CMCA, engage in recreation activities, etc., and yet for private foreshore and seabed land, none of this applies under Clause 19, and surely, if we're to be a fair society, that should be redressed, and the private title shouldn't be sacrosanct in terms of public access. And I think this is part of, Hilary Calvert says, it doesn't relate to general access to that area. In fact, I think what Parliament should address, and unfortunately this bill doesn't, there have been sort of attempts at it with committees and all kinds of things, but it's really got nowhere, is developed greater access to the seashore for all New Zealanders. And there have been some big fights on this. On Waiheke Island, John Spencer prevented public access from people in Waiheke to the beaches that his land surrounded. And I think that if you look around the world, and there's an interjection there, if you look, for instance, in Britain, I was over in Britain a few years ago when my brother used to live there. He lives in Wellington now, and we went for a walk. They not only had all sorts of alleyways that got you everywhere in the countryside, they also had what was called a right to roam, where you could work over private property, well established and supported by the people of Great Britain. And we should have something similar to that in New Zealand, so that all the pristine beaches we have, instead of being shut off from ordinary people, sometimes boaties can get into them if they've got usually the richer section of the population, but ordinary people can't get to these beaches. And it relates to another project, the great project by Jeff Chappell to Aroa, I think it's called, the Long Path Around New Zealand. A lot of that is around the coast, and having provisions for greater access to the coastal area would help in that, the continuity of those paths, being able to enjoy the scenery along the waterfront around the country. And I think that it's important that we try and redress that in the committee stages. Unfortunately, Clause 19, excluding private property, contrasting with Clause 27, 27, giving all of the rights of access in relation to what could be Māori customary title, it just doesn't wash, and the Green Party is very much against that contradiction and would like greater rights for New Zealand people as a whole, and greater rights for Māori people, greater rights than exist under this bill.